So this is the new version of the UnderTone audio, UnFairchild. We switched back to the original 6386 tube, so it's going to sound even more like the original Fairchild than the first version that we did. And I would even say that this sounds as much like an original Fairchild as original Fairchilds sound like each other, because all the ones that I've used sounded quite different. So in addition to sounding like the original Fairchild, we added a bunch of cool new features. The original Fairchild did not actually even have a bypass, so now you can bypass it and compare with and without. We have output VU metering, which the original didn't have either. We added really fine adjust for left and right level, so you can make sure that left and right is balanced when you have it on your mix bus or any sort of stereo source. We have the usual gain reduction metering that you'd expect on a compressor. We have the original 6 presets that were on the original Fairchild, 1 through 6 here. Most people found the first couple the most useful. So positions 1 and 2 sound very much like the original Fairchild. It's basically the exact same thing. And then I decided this time around that I'm tired of presets. I want to just be able to set the attack and release independently. So we now have these variable modes that take you down here, and you can just set the attack and release however you want, independent of each other, like you would on a modern compressor. The other thing that we added is proper stereo linking. The original Fairchild actually did not stereo link. They had a thing called lateral vertical, which was really for cutting vinyl. So we have that as well, which is essentially an MS mode. We actually refer to it as MS on this machine, but it's the same thing as lateral vertical. The original MS mode is not hugely useful for me because it's compressing mono and stereo separately from each other, and so the stereo image is sort of fluctuating. So we actually added another mode where it's this MS linked mode, where you have access to mono and stereo information and how it triggers the compression, but it will always compress things equally, so the stereo image doesn't fluctuate. And so what that allows you to do is, if I turn up the threshold on only the top channel, then your whole mix will be compressed by just the mono information in the mix. Or conversely, you can turn this down, turn up the signal on the lower channel, and your whole mix is being compressed by just the stereo information. And there's going to be some really cool options of what is sort of emphasizing the compression in the mix. So once you've established what information you want triggering the compression, you can then play with the blend between the mono and stereo information the way you can with any MS processor. And you can do that trick where you turn up the stereo information a little bit and it widens out the stereo mix a little bit. So you can actually use this as an MS processor as well. So the other thing that we did on this one is we added a sidechain insert. So there's a very popular trend in compression to EQ the sidechain, maybe pull out some low frequencies, so the compressor is not over compressing the low end and taking out too much of the kick drum or reacting too much to the kick drum. So you can engage a sidechain insert. Right now we're doing the very decadent thing of EQing our sidechain with a pair of Pultec EQs. So I'm just pulling out some low end, and you can hear it compress the kick drum less, but still everything else is getting the same amount of compression. The other thing that we realized when you have access to a sidechain insert on this compressor is you can actually change it to be a feed-forward compressor instead of a feedback compressor. The original Fairchild was inherently designed as a feedback compressor, meaning that it takes the signal from the final output of the device and actually uses that to trigger the compression. And it's kind of an odd thing because the signal that is triggering compression is getting turned down, and so that source drops as it compresses, and it essentially makes the compressor sort of aware of how much it's compressing. So as it compresses a lot, that source signal drops, and the compressor essentially is going like, wow, I'm compressing a lot, so I'm going to ease off. And that's what made the original Fairchild do that really smooth compression for vocals and stuff like that. And so As cool as that is, feed-forward compression can also be really cool. There's some modern compressors that are really popular, like a DBX 160 or the SSL compressors that people really like because they're so aggressive sounding. And so you can switch this thing to be a feed-forward compressor, and it does that really, really hard-hitting, very aggressive, grabby compression, but it's doing it with tubes instead of a VCA like you'd have in a DBX 160. So it's a really cool effect to hear on this type of a circuit. I think I like the aggressiveness of it, but it has a sort of more organic quality to it because it's being done with 14 tubes instead of a VCA. The other thing that we have on here is a DC threshold, and this essentially, when you use the DC threshold in combination with the main threshold, you can have different ratios of compression, and so you can adjust it to have a harder knee at a particular amount of compression or a softer knee at that same amount of compression. So all those things combined, this thing can do everything that an original Fairchild did. It does a whole host of things that the original never did, which ultimately for me makes it so you can cover the span of what the sound of a Fairchild really represents at this point, because the original units are all so different. The different ones that I've used over the years all sounded a little bit different, and I can navigate my way to all of those different sounds with this one UnFairchild.